virtual seminars. I apologize for this delay. We had some technical issues that we had to solve. I am Antonio Levy. I am the coordinator of GE.transform from the European Union. We are going to begin with some instructions and directions. I'd like to mention that we have simultaneous interpretation. You can use it through Zoom and on the same platform. Let us begin. This is session number 4. We are fortunate to have today Carlos Barria from Chile and Juan Jose Garcia from El Salvador. And our agenda is a welcome address as soon as brief as possible because of our delay, then presentations, a discussion with the panel members, and last but not least, a poll and questions. For the interactive poll, please be ready. We will do it through the platform. Let us go then to our first item on the agenda, some directions as to how to use simultaneous interpretation. Use the interpretation button at the bottom of your Zoom window to choose your preferred language. Please make sure that you are using the desktop client or the Android iOS application. Long-term scenarios for the development of national plans to guide them in the clean energy transition in Latin America. This is a series of virtual seminars to share the best practices and experiences of energy planners from governments in the region. This series began in February. This is the 4th session with the participation today of Chile and El Salvador. With no further comments, let us begin. We are delayed 40 minutes. We apologize for this delay. Welcome remarks from Irena, CIPAL, and GE.transform. Pablo, would you like to start? Thank you very much, Antonio. I apologize as well to the audience and the speakers. Carlos, Juan Jose, thanks for joining us today. Chile is a member country of the GS campaign and coordinates IRENA at ministry level. El Salvador is today with us too, and it's a member of the network of IRENA. With Chile, we have had a very good relationship. We have learned a lot from the Chilean experience in the past 2 to 3 years with their campaign. They have been a reference in the region and in the world as to the process that they have for energy in the long term. And I would like to thank Chile for sharing their experience with us in the work we are doing with the ICLAC to develop and share scenarios for the clean energy transition plans in Latin America. Juan Jose, as well, thank you. He is our focus contact in El Salvador for the network. We're very happy to have El Salvador with us. We have also to learn from their experience, from what they are doing in energy planning and the use of scenarios. As Antonio said, this series is taking place at regional level. This is the 4th edition, and I thank you again, and let us enjoy then the session. Thank you, Pablo. He's from Germany, joining us. He's joining us from Germany. Now, Ruben, you have the floor. Well, I apologize also because of this delay. It has been a very complex morning. We appreciate that you are there with us. joining us. And I'd like to thank Carlos and Juan Jose as well from Chile and El Salvador for being so patient today and for being here still with us. Thank you, Carlos Barrios, who is the head of the Prospective Planning and Regulatory Analysis Division of Chile. We have a lot to learn from what they have done. Their 2050 plan, the implementation of that plan, the new policy that they have. We also have Juan Jose Garcia, who is the director of the National Energy Council. We have a lot to learn from El Salvador, particularly on their efforts to develop geothermal sources. Attempts have been made in Chile and other countries in the region, but the El Salvador example is outstanding. Well, I think we're going to share knowledge. We're going to be learning from the best practices, and this is key to make progress in the region. And no doubt, Chile and El Salvador are key countries. They are also members of the Energy Planners Forum in the region of TFEP. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ruben. I had also intended to say a few words, but I'm going to be brief now. The ministries and institutions in our countries oftentimes operate in isolation without coordination. We know that. We in GET.transform are very proud of being part of this initiative because we want to provide a common ground for actors, topics, and projects to harmonize our efforts and to develop sustainable measures that would be effective. GET.transform supports the countries in the region in this project in pro of the development of public institutions. Well, I have a bug with my computer, so I'm sorry. Well, I wanted to say that GET.transform is supporting the countries in the region. Energy is not only oil barrels or watts. Energy means safety in transportation, in security and safety, and in food. Energy is everywhere, so energy planning plays a key role for all societies and countries. These seminars on energy planning for the long term are an outstanding opportunity to deepen the dialogue among our countries and to learn about challenges and successes in this great effort, and being aware of the number of aspects that are involved and that have to be included in the planning effort for energy. GET.transform, together with IRENA and CEPAL, are proud to be part of this initiative within the framework of the ICLAC initiatives. Well, I'd like to introduce Carlos Barria. He is the head of the Ministry of Chile. He's a civil engineer in industry, and he holds a master's degree from the Catholic University. He also has a diploma in law. He has conducted studies in the high management of corporations. He has advised many public and private corporations in strategic decision-making and planning. Go ahead, Carlos. Thank you, Antonio. Thanks to everybody and to the organizers for holding these seminars, and in particular for today's seminar. I thank you indeed, and I am highly motivated because of your comments on the relevance and importance of planning, the importance of having a long-term vision. We know those who do planning in energy or any kind of energy, we planners know that we don't have a crystal ball in our hands. However, we can manage to interpret the future that we may imagine or envision, considering input from the various sectors and, of course, long-term ideas. Well, this is my presentation. Thank you. In 15 minutes, my idea is to show you a summary of the main aspects in our planning process in Chile. the long-term energy planning process. This process in Chile is provided under the law, the general law for electrical services. So it is a regulated process. We have regulations. We have a good structure. It calls for participation as well under the structure it has. And in this year, by the way, we are in the second 5-year planning process that we have already started. And this is what I want to show you in my presentation. Thank you. The Chilean energy sector is undergoing transformation. We have a lot of ambitions with this project, a great climate vision as well. We know the greenhouse gas effect issue. The energy sector is responsible for 70% of emissions, in some countries even more, 78 in my country. So the energy sector, including not only generation, but also including transportation, energy for the industry. We have a very strong mining industry. Also the building and construction area, the use of energy in houses, in residential facilities and buildings. So in Chile, overall, this accounts for 78% of the energy emissions in Chile. This is the result of some work done with the Ministry of Energy and the Environment. We have made an inventory of GHG emissions, and this has been key to update the information, the statistical information that we have in the country as to emissions in Chile. Well, so the energy sector in Chile gives us an opportunity. This energy transition gives us an opportunity to become a solution, a climate and environmental solution for society. And this may be replicated in Chile and in other countries as well, I'm sure. Next slide. Well, in 2019, in Chile, we set a goal, which is very ambitious, as I said, for a developing country, but we want to become carbon neutral by 2050. And there is a second commitment involved in this path towards being carbon neutral. And that is that by 2030, we're going to have a milestone that has to do with the national commitments and the NOCs, the new, to have new non-conventional energies by 2030. So we have this commitment with the world and with our country, first to become coal neutral and also to mitigate emissions in all the sectors. We have worked on this analysis in order to establish and to plan and to develop a long-term vision as to the main measures that should be implemented to become carbon or coal neutral. We have to have a sustainable industry, including mining. We have to have green hydrogen. We have been doing a lot in increasing the production of green hydrogen in Chile because we have a lot of non-conventional capabilities. The ministry has entered into an understanding agreement with Rotterdam port so that this port, which is one of the major ports in Europe, so the Rotterdam port will work with us to be the hub for exporting green hydrogen. You can read about this in the media today. Then electromobility. We are making great steps towards electromobility to have electromobility included in our public transportation system, meaning electrical buses. This is a public tool that will be key to motivate people to use electrical vehicles, not only for individuals, but in general for the public. Then we have coal withdrawal. That's our enabling measure. That's how we call it today. Almost 38 to 40% of electrical energy in Chile today in the national electrical system is produced with coal. So today, the energy sector depends a great deal on coal, but we're moving towards a transition when we are implementing a lot of renewable energy sources, new ones. This year, we will have 6,000 megawatts coming from renewable energies, wind and solar, particularly. And the maximum demand in Chile is around 12,000 megawatts. The installed total capacity is around 25,000 megawatts. Therefore, we are undergoing an intense moment, intense times. And in association with this, we have coal withdrawal. We have to replace that 40% for something. We have a strong commitment with companies, with state companies, public ones and private ones, to remove, to phase out coal from now up to 2040. And we have done a lot of work with some major companies who are helping us to withdraw coal. And also, energy efficiency. It is key. A few months ago, we passed the first law on energy efficiency in Chile. A number of measures and actions are provided under this law, which will force companies that have a high consumption to establish energy management systems and to move forward in the achievement of energy efficiency objectives. Well, I'm going to skip this very quickly. This has to do with the recent history and the forecast that we have for electrical generation in Chile. The recent history has allowed us to work on some electrical matrices that will adapt to new challenges. We have no fossil fuels in Chile in large amounts, only in the area of Magallanes. We have some oil, etc. Basically, all the energy is imported, all the fuels. And as to electric generation, we have been dependent on coal, on natural gas. We depended a lot on Argentinian natural gas in the past. Then, around 2004, 2010, we built LNG terminals and new coal-fired plants. We are bringing also gas from Trinidad and Tobago. But the experience is in Chile that we had to face crises in the past, emergency situations, drought also at the end of 98 and 99. And the generation power in Chile depends of a lot of hydroelectricity. So in the past, we have been going through many crises, as I said, and finally we decided that we had to do something about it. And in the 10s, in 2013, 2014, we started NOCs, including hydro. This is going to be the new base for the generation of electricity. Our forecast is that by 2050, more than 90% of electrical energy production will be based on renewable energies. And by 2030, the figures are that around 70% of the electrical power production will be based on renewables. Today, we're about 40%. So there is still a lot to do to achieve this generation that we want. This presentation will be available for you to see it in more detail later on. Well, what about energy planning? I'm not going to detail everything because this is very boring, I know. But as I said, our energy planning is provided under the electrical law. This is a regulatory tool indeed. And so summarized, it provides that we have to do energy planning every 5 years for at least 40 years ahead. I thought you had lost me. Well, we have to do energy scenarios for at least 30 years, and this is a process that has to be taken or carried out every 5 years. We also have to identify what we call power generation development poles, development poles.
Aló, Carlos, se te está cortando. ¿Me escuchan?
Yo te escucho. Sí, es un tema de... Sí,
Carlos, can you hear us? Yes, the screen is frozen. He's having some trouble. It is on Carlos' side.
creo que ahí está volviendo, ¿no?
Ahí está regresando Carlos.
He's
Ahí
back.
Adelante, Carlos.
Hola, sí, ¿me escucharon esta última lámina? No sé.
I don't know if you heard what I said on the last slide.
Adelante, sí.
Yes, we did. Well, I was saying that our energy planning is a regulatory tool. Every 5 years, we have to carry out this process to develop scenarios for 30 years. We also do forecasts on energy supply and on demand, and not only for the electrical sector, but for the whole energy sector.
La siguiente.
Next.
Estamos en la lámina de proceso de participación ciudadana. ¿La ves
Ah,
ahí?
ya. Perfecto, yo veo la anterior, pero no importa. Sí, una de las claves de nuestros procesos de
And a key
planificación
aspect of our energy planning process, which we emphasize, is participation. We carry out these processes with a very strong participation from the major stakeholders, with the participation of those who are interested in our planning process. We have a registry of entities, and we open this registry for people, natural and legal persons, to register and join us in this effort. In the current process, we have around 700 people registered already. This includes companies and natural persons, and this provides legitimacy to our process. Citizenship participation is key, and also we call for participation of people from other regions in the country. Characteristically, Chile has been very centralized, but we have managed to have the regional participation at a high level, and this is key for this process. It's key for many other processes as well in the region to have sound citizenship participation and regional participation. So as I said, processes should have a high level of participation.
Bien, la siguiente, por favor.
Next one, please.
Bien, esta lámina muestra todo el proceso.
This slide shows the process that we carry out to expand electrical transmission. And here, energy planning is key.
Responsabilidad de distintas instituciones.
The responsibility for this process is shared by many institutions, the Ministry of Energy, the National Electrical Coordinator, which is the independent operator in the country of the electrical system. We also have the Energy National Commission, which is the regulatory body or authority, which establishes expansion plans on a yearly basis for transmission. And also, we have other institutions in connection with providing services and in connection with the approval of the various infrastructures and plans for electrical transmission in the country. So this is a process that shows on this slide that it includes a number of stages to analyze, verify the various aspects involved in developing and operating the electrical transmission infrastructure. This infrastructure is a complex one. It's difficult to identify all the parts it involves, but this is to show you that idea. And this slide, it's quite busy and details what our methodology is to make forecast models to include the variables that are involved in energy planning. We're combining here two types of models. We have energy band forecast model. Through this model, we add to the methodology our plans, our forecasts, our historical data, forecasts for population, for housing requirements, etc. So these models allows us to define the demand and the electrical demand, of course. And based upon the electrical demand, we will run the other model for the operation of the system in the long term. This model is to co-optimize the operation of the system and the planning of the system. And with this modeling, we reach a better approach to be able to meet the needs in the future. So this is a combination of models, as I said, that allows us to give deliverables. For instance, emissions, generation, transmission needs. And we are combining this with another model, the co-benefit model. What does this mean? As we electrify some energy uses, such as we eliminate the use of wood, which is so common in our country, as we electrify things, we get co-benefits. An example, reduction of local pollutants and particulates, for instance. We also have a model to analyze distributed models, the transmission and generation of electricity. And this is key because in the long term, we have to know how distributed generation will work. Also, electromobility. The next one, please. I am about to finish. And this is the methodology for the construction of energy scenarios. This is a very graphical image intended to summarize in a very simple way what we have had in mind, what we have developed. We want to project or forecast long-term scenarios that will allow us to have defined an area or a spectrum quite wide of occurrences. Why? Because at the end of the day, what we're doing is to find energy scenarios that will occur through time, through years. They will be updated every 5 years, of course, but they will allow us to make decisions today, for instance, for transmission structure in the future. And if we make it wrong, and we hope we are not, if we make mistakes, the idea is that the associated risk to mistakes would be diminished, mitigated, and minimized. So what we do is to build scenarios based upon occurrences, which will provide a framework for whatever will happen. And those energy scenarios are built based upon a coherent history and the 4 visions we have to achieve the sector goals and commitments. This is a flow diagram of energy planning. I'm going to focus only on 2 things. First, our input. The input we're using comes from the experience we have, the data we have at the Ministry of Energy. But in addition, we have added climate commitments, environmental commitments, also what the citizenships wants, the energy policy we're developing, and the strategies of other sectors. All this input will allow us to build the long-term energy scenarios. Then We have the models that we run. We have to do forecasts of supply, demand. We have optimized generation of electricity, etc. And then we will deliver deliverables on CO2 emissions, local pollution, the evolution of electricity rates, renewables integration, access and coverage of the electrical system in protected areas, for instance, and also territorial aspects, which are key to develop our infrastructure. And the last slide that I have prepared for you is this one. It's just a summary of what we are improving through this process. As I said initially, it's a process provided under our electricity law. The process was developed between 2016 and 17, 18, but this year we have to start developing the second process, and we are already working on this, and we are improving many aspects. We have now a wider national coverage, for instance. We are establishing mitigation measures and actions also for adaptation. We're also adding restrictions to the model to be able to analyze the flexibility of the electrical system. We are adding now new models to assess new technologies, such as storage systems with different durations. And we are also adding a larger number of variables related to environmental issues and aspects. So this is our work. This is what we're doing. Of course, we are not in the perfect model yet. We have not reached that point yet. It will take us a long time. Well, we are on the right track. I think this is a very good approach. And for the Ministry of Energy and for the decision-making process in the energy sector, this process is key. It is an instrumental process and adds value in the decision-making process of the country. This is all. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for being so patient.
Perfecto, muchas gracias, Carlos.
Thank you very much, Carlos. Very interesting. I have the experience of working with the Ministry of Energy in Chile. It was a very good experience. Thank you very much. Now we have Juan José Garcia. He's a mechanical engineer.
So he did a master's in business management in
And a master's
renewable
degree in
energies
finance.
also, and financial management, also project management, data science, and energy policies. Juan Jose worked for 13 years in the electric sector in El Salvador, and also he just worked in geothermal energy, fossil energies, and all other types of energy. And he is the Director of Energy Planification in the National Energy Council in El Salvador. Thank you very much, Antonio. Thank you very much, Pablo, and thank you for all the team. First and foremost, I want to thank Irina and Sepal also and GET.transform for this opportunity to talk and share with you the case of El Salvador in energy planning as a more recent member of the network. My objective today is just to share with you all the information about the energy planning in El Salvador, how we just use the process of energy transformation and how we tackle it seen from a perspective of institutional frameworking and political frameworking and regulatory frameworking also, and of course also through the framework of capacity building that we're just carrying out in El Salvador. So in this sense, in order to understand what the situation is and where we are going, it is important to know briefly where we come from. And the same as many other countries in the region, the energy planning and strategic planning, long-term planning was just carried out by the state. So in El Salvador, we have a vertically integrated model. So it's the state operator, basically, who is in charge of the production, transformation, and transport of the energy. And between 1996 and 2010, we had a whole series of reforms in our energy markets that led to the elimination of the vertical integration that we had, and we created competitive markets through the different chains, so the different steps of the energy chain. So we made substantial reforms to free and liberalize our energy market, and we have many reforms. We have many aspects in the reform that were not considered, such as the comprehensive planning, because we opened the markets, but all the institutions that appeared after this reform were not integrated. So we did not think about the integral planning. So this framework is still on, and we're just based on it. So for 14 years, since a very important reform that we had in the country, we still are in a context where we see the need for a long-term integration of all the different operators in the energy sector. We need to have a much better cooperation between all the different institutions in the energy sector. Of course, there is information in the energy sector, but it's not processed in the best manner in order to be able to take decisions. So that's why we created the National Energy Council. And since then, now for 11 years, since 2010, we have just improved many aspects of energy planning. To give you an example, in 1996, we stopped doing the national energy balances because it was the national operator who carried out this with the reform. Nobody for 14 years was supposed to do this. It was very complicated to create strategies and policies. So the different stakeholders were not perfectly defined. So these were some of the problems that we had at the end of the reform. But since 2010, now we see that the capacities for energy planning that were created in the past, because there was a cut in our functioning model. So all these capacities were dispersed all over the place. So all these different experts maybe joined other institutions. So we did not have a program to make sure that there is a sustainability for this process. And it was not until 2010 that we restarted the energy planning actions. So we started from scratch, and it was a very important challenge that we had in front of us. So as I told you, we had many improvements in energy planning. Nevertheless, today we are facing realities with the new technologies, with the new energy uses, the climate change, the mitigation, adaptation, resilience to climate change, the new consumption patterns also that are creating new challenges. So we ask ourselves in El Salvador, do we have the capacity to face this from a long-term planning point of view? So these are the different challenges that we have nowadays. This is just in a general manner what is the situation now in El Salvador. So today, the energy planning process that we started is frameworked in a series of laws. The law of the creation of the National Commission for Energy also, but also in the Constitution of El Salvador Republic. So we have an article that talks about promoting the economic development and best use of the resources. So that's why we need a tool of long-term planning in order to promote efficiently the economic and national development. So we had the law for the creation of the National Energy Commission. So the National Energy Council will have the floor in order to elaborate the energy planning at a short, medium, and long term, and to elaborate the national energy policy. And a very important aspect also that in the past was not well considered was the fact that our regulation and our regulatory framework obliges us to have consulting processes in order to elaborate public policies. So in Chile, for example, we have the elaboration of different scenarios and it promotes, but our law promotes the consensus between the different key stakeholders about all the actions that will have to do with the planning of the energy sector. So besides the creation of the National Energy Commission, there was the General Electricity Law, where we have different functions in energy planning, especially the expansion of the transmission network. So it's not the CNE that is in charge of planning the transmission network. It is the transmission operator that has to do. But anyway, the distribution and networks are in the hands of the private operators that work in the sector of the energy distribution. Of course, we still need to improve our regulatory frameworks in order to improve this process of distribution planning. So how do we work in El Salvador from the point of view of the energy governance and also energy planning? In our country, we don't have a ministry dedicated to energy like we see in different other countries, or the Secretariat for Energy. In El Salvador, we have the National Energy Council that is a body that is in charge of establishing the policies and long-term strategies for the energy sector. So we have a board, governing board formed by the Minister of Economy, Environment, Public Works, Finance, and Consumers Defense. So this governing board is presided by the ministers or the vice ministers who are in charge of these institutions. So one of the advantages in our strategies or policies that we design is that they go through the different filters of the different ministries. So for example, we have the different perspectives: environment, economy, public works, finance, energy. And this is an advantage that we have because we have a consensus of all the key stakeholders. And on top of that, all the policies that are promulgated are just done at the highest level. So the Energy National Commission carries out consultation with the different civil society organizations, NGOs, etc., through a council, an advisory committee where we have the different stakeholders in the sector in order to give advice, to analyze different aspects that the National Energy Council needs from this advisory committee. And as I told you, this commission establishes for all the energy sector the policies and long-term plans taken all into account all the inputs and all the information plans and visions from the different markets, the electricity market, the also energy market. We have agents in the different markets also. So this is how we function in general for the energy planning in our country. And also in terms of the institutions, we still have challenges that I'll be tackling in my presentation later on. One of the main products that we have in the energy planning process is the national energy policy. Of course, we have other products also that I will mention later on, but basically the main work is what we do in terms of creating strategies, orientations, long-term trends. So in 2010, we elaborated the first energy policy. And as I told you, we had a previous stage where we had very little capacities in energy planning because we had lost a lot of expertise in 14 years. So that's why in the mandate of the Energy Commission, we needed to elaborate these plans for 25 years, 2010, 2024. And this policy contributed. It started with this policy. We started organizing all the energy sector. And thanks to this policy, we diversified our energy matrix. We increased the renewable energies, variable energies that participate in the sector. The energy efficiency started becoming more and more important in our country. And there's a whole series of different aspects and elements that were created through this policy. It was a very good policy. And of course, there are certain aspects that were maybe weaker that we had to improve because there was not a possibility to have a constant evaluation and assessment. So we needed to work on the sustainabilities. Of course, we just planned this policy based on certain objectives, but through the monitoring and evaluation processes, some of these first premises lost of their importance. So there was no sustainability in terms of updating the priorities. So this was one of the first weak points that we had. So now with the new government, we started re-evaluating the old policy, and we had a vision on 30 years ahead. And this policy was just created with a huge participation from the sector. So we lasted 2 years for the elaboration of this new strategy. In terms of energy planning, which is this main instrument for creating policies, besides all the technical aspects of creating long-term scenarios, etc., the planning here played a role of cohesion between the different sectorial plans. So the economic development plan, the investment plan, how do we combine this with our planning for fighting climate change or the incorporation of new technologies, etc. So this process played this fundamental role in aggregating and coordinating all these different planning processes. So the energy planning process uses mainly for the national, is used for the national energy policy, but also to the different planning scenarios are just used for the long-term policies. So we had the expansion plan for production, and then for transmission, another plan. So we have also our NDC objectives in terms of emissions reduction, and also for the different sectors. For example, the transport sector, the penetration of electric vehicles, etc. And to conclude, so we have still some challenges that we're just working on. We need to reorganize our institutional framework because we have laws that are quite antiquated, that don't correspond to the reality now and the needs needs that we have in the energy sector in order to have the best energy transition process. So we still are facing these challenges. We need to still working on a capacity building in energy. There are different fields of expertise here where we need to carry out some capacity building, and we depend on international cooperation for this. And this type of fora, like here today, where we exchange information and good practices with other countries, and also in terms of energy information, how can we integrate the energy systems and receive information from other sectors that have an impact on energy planning. And on the short term, we have a very important challenge, which is to characterize much better our consumption sectors that generate energy demand. So some sectors we understand how they work, but in other sectors we don't know how the energy is used, is consumed, and we need to have this information in order to work on our long-term planning. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Juan Jose. It was very interesting what you talked about the planning as an instrument that plays a role of cohesion between the different sectors. And now I want to invite Ruben Contreras and Carlos and Juan Jose for the debate. So Ruben, Juan Jose, and Carlos. Thank you very much, Antonio. I want to thank Carlos and Juan Jose for their magnificent presentations. We had a lot to learn from them, and they had a lot to share with us. I'm going to start with Carlos. I just congratulated him for their 2050 planning and for having this long-term vision. This is absolutely fantastic. You just named many elements that are extremely interesting. We have very little time left in front of us, but let's try to have a dynamic discussion here. So I have two main questions. One has to do with hydrogen. You talked about the phasing out of the carbon plants and the infrastructures. And are you thinking about developing a hub in the north using solar energy for the desalination of water and the production of hydrogen and electricity? And also with the phasing out of carbon, how was the interaction between you and the private sector? Uh, how do you see the foreign direct investment in Chile in order to improve the financial power to carry out all those programs? So this is the first question. And the other question, what I liked very much and what I thought was very innovative is how you work on planning. It is not just the mathematical optimization, typical exercise, the lowest cost and the lines. I see that you're just working, including environmental aspects, studying the impact that your planning exercise is generating in the reduction of emissions. And you have added and included social aspects. And I want to congratulate you for this because those who remember when we started this forum, one of the main ideas of this forum was to go towards a sustainable planning, not only including the economical aspects, but also environment and social ones. I want to ask you in terms of the social elements that are very complex there. What are the different elements that you are thinking about including in the future? For example, what are you going to analyze for example, the social inclusion, the poverty pockets, how you can improve the quality of access for the marginalized sectors of the society, in order to understand how in the ministry you are working on this. I really congratulate you, because the presentation was very clear. I loved your diagrams, and thank you very much. And now I'm giving you the possibility to answer. Thank you so much, Ruben. We have to understand how our strategy in this planning process was made. We used a lot all the different elements in the process. So every 5 years, we are updating the process per se, more than having results. And what we know from the models is that the optimization models and results, they depend on the different elements that we incorporate in the models. So what is very important in the process, it needs to be participative, it needs to be completely transparent. We need to open the floor for all the different voices and capture everything. This is absolutely paramount in our planning model, because the models change, the consumption patterns and change also. You know that for example, the prices of the different types of energy are going to change in the future. So we need to incorporate all this in our long-term plans. So the processes are very important, and we need to follow up on them. And this is and correct the trends. Chile is one of the countries that have an economy that is open for investment, that promotes investment. We're a smaller country. We're talking about 18 million inhabitants. Therefore, we are an exporting economy. So that's why we depend a lot on the foreign investment and in order to export it to the world. So in terms of energy, we always had I would not call it difficulty, but maybe the problem that we never exported energy, because we don't have fossil fuels. We have a lot of renewable potential in solar, wind, geothermal, marine energy. Maybe it is one of the countries in the world that has the highest potential in marine energy and wave energy. So we need to work on our transmission lines. But you know that the Latin American countries also have a lot of renewable potential. So we are not offering anything new. So hydrogen is a tremendous opportunity in terms of energy for the country. And the last year in January, we published our national strategy for green hydrogen, and we published it with a clear intention to answer to your first question, to offer to the world, to the potential investors, the opportunity to come to Chile to create hubs for green hydrogen production. Of course, we are not going to be the only ones who are going to produce green hydrogen. The Arab countries, Morocco, South Africa, have huge potentials. So even wind and solar potentials can help countries to produce green hydrogen. So not only we just joined this race, but we're trying to move forward very fastly. We have around 40 projects in green hydrogen that we are developing, different sizes. We have an enormous project in the Magellan area, so where we have a huge wind potential. It is one of the best regions in the world in terms of wind energy. So we have in the Magellan sector in Patagonia a massive plant. So we have plants that produce 60–70%, and we have potential in wind energy in the south of Chile, and 60–70% of wind. So green hydrogen is very cheap to produce. So that's why in 2030, we have the goal to have the cheapest green hydrogen in the world. So we need to work very hard in order to reach this goal. So that's why we need to work on attracting investments also. And in terms of your question, we need to adapt to climate change. And in order to adapt to climate change, so the water resources are not going to be the same as before. You know that we are an agricultural country and we depend a lot on the exports of food products. So we need the water. So that's why the renewable energies will allow us to have not only clean energies, but also to have much lower costs in the production of energy for our agriculture. So we always are developing different ways of attracting investment. And as for the second question, it is very highly pertinent. So our economy at the end of the day, in terms of investments in electricity production, transmission, most of the investments that we have are private ones. There is one state operator, which is the National Petroleum Company that works in refining oil to transform it into gasoline. But we don't have any other state operators for transmission, for transmission, etc. There is a very clear framework, but all the different operators are private. So we need to have a participative social aspect in all our processes, especially in electrifying the isolated areas. In terms of energy quality in our country, we have certain rural areas where electricity arrives only 3 hours a day. So we need to improve these figures. We need to create programs in order to carry out the different types of solutions to help these marginalized pockets. Yesterday, for example, in an island in the south of the country that did not have electricity was electrified for the first time in history. The families, there are around 50 families who live in this island, for the first time in their lives were electrified. So all these processes allow us to work and move forward. This is absolutely excellent. You can continue. Yes, yes. And as you said, within all the parameters that we are using in the definition of energy scenarios, we want to use in this process not only the GDP growth indicator that is the most used in the world, but we also want to find a way. We have different technicians who are just working in order to project in the different energy scenarios other variables that allow us to measure. Of course, this is a complex exercise, but to measure the levels of equity in our long-term projects and plans that we have. We know that the GDP indicator, that is a classical macroeconomic growth indicator, is not enough to understand certain situations in the future, especially in terms of the most vulnerable pockets of the population in our country. So that's why we need to incorporate different variables that show the different situations, and we are working on this. Thank you very much. That's fantastic. Thank you. I congratulate you for all the work that you're carrying out now. This is a fantastic news. These families that received electricity for the first time, because we are accustomed to having electricity in our homes, but we don't understand the impact that electricity has on the life of people who never had it before. Of course, we cannot have the best projections for the future, but we need to understand and learn from our processes, and we need to update the information each time. We need to learn what is the state of the art in the country, what are the different conditions in the different systems, and this is absolutely fundamental. Thank you very much, Carlos, for everything. And now I'm going to ask a question to Juan Jose. How are you doing, Juan Jose? I want to thank you for your participation. The National Energy Commission is a good friend. We have worked on ethanol with you for many years. I want to congratulate you for the new energy policy that you have for 2050. This is absolutely paramount. You need to have a framework that will guide the process. This is absolutely paramount. You cannot do anything. You would be just moving in obscurity if you don't have a very clear framework to move forward. You learned also from the policies that you had in the past, and this was very good. So I have a few questions for you. You talked about the planning, and this is something that you have started now, especially the long-term planning. This is new to you in El Salvador. So what are you thinking about making this quantitative and qualitative leap, including these environmental and social variables in your planning? And I'm saying this because you said that the transmission and distribution lines are in the hands of the public sector. So how are you going to plan all this in the future? My question is, are you thinking about creating new regulatory framework in order to align this vision that you have to give a certain direction to the different operators in where to invest and how to invest? This is the first question. The second question has to do with the exercise per se, the planning exercise per se. You said that you carried out a lot of national consultation processes, and this is extremely important. Carlos also talked about this. I think that this is a novelty in the past. Nobody asked about consultation, and this is extremely important. This is an enormous qualitative leap. So how did you organize this consultation process? So this advisory committee, when you organize public consultation processes with the academia, with the society, is it the advisory committee that organizes this, or it is a complete different process? Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ruben, for allowing us to participate in this network. It is very important for us to understand and learn from processes in other countries. As for your concrete questions in our planning exercise, we are working on building the capacities at a national level, and I was saying that the technical assistance of the international community and the multilateral organizations were fundamental for us because they allowed us to improve our models, simulation models, projection models, and to include all these socioeconomic variables, and also to understand the consuming behaviors also and the environmental variables. So how can we reach a carbon neutral situation in 2050? In this sense, to identify which are the different sectors that emit carbon, what should be our different targets in different time frames to establish the best mix of energy production in the country. So we are incorporating all these elements in our planning exercise. And as I said, it's thanks to the help of different experts that we have in Latin America. We are improving those processes. It is a continuous improvement process. We have been improving throughout the years, and we realized that we need to incorporate other types of variables, analysis, and segregating the variables, understanding better the technologies that we're using in order to improve the process in terms of the legal frameworks. And this new energy policy that we have, we want to modernize the regulation. This is going to be a cornerstone in order to permit the different strategies and plans that we have for the country. We have a different regulatory framework that do not respond to the actual challenges or the future challenges that we will have. So we need to update them. So we have certain attributions for energy policy or energy planning that are dispersed in different institutions, and we want to correct this situation. So now we are carrying out a profound, comprehensive revision of our legal frameworks, and we hope to put improvements in all these processes in order to make them much more efficient. And a key point here has always been the cooperation between the different state bodies, the executive government that needs to implement everything, and the legislative power that works on putting the legal frameworks. We need to have a much better cooperation. In the past, this relationship was quite complicated, and this openness in order to carry out adjustments in certain laws, legal frameworks, in order to improve certain processes. And in this case, we're talking about energy, but this can be done in any other issue also. So with this reform of our national law, this will be a wonderful opportunity in order to improve this cooperation between the different organs of the state. This is on our to-do list. It's a priority, and not only for planning, but also in order to create new uses of energy in El Salvador. We have geothermal potentials that have not been exploited to their fullest. So we need to have a legal framework in order to really take advantage of this geothermal energy, and also the green hydrogen. Also, these are going to play a very important role in allowing the country to export energy in the future. Of course, the legal framework is absolutely key, and we are working on this. And you asked about the public consultation processes that we carry out. Since the year 2010, our way of consulting on our policies and strategies was through our advisory committee. So in this new law, we created the form on how we use this advisory committee. So we have representatives from different sectors, industrial associations, entrepreneurial associations, universities in the country, environmental NGOs, consumers associations, of also unions of the people who work in the energy sector. So this is how in the past we used to carry out the consultations. So the advisory committee met and carried out an analysis, gave a feedback, and gave proposals. But since this new policy, in the process of the elaboration of this new policy, we decided to open more the consultation, to have a participative, consultative process, going to all the different stakeholders in the energy sector, the distributing operators, production operators, commercializers, universities, and even international organizations. OLADE, for example, helped us and gave us a very good feedback to help us in the elaboration of our policies. IRENA was consulted also in other organizations that helped us. So the advisory committee helped us in the management of this consultation process. So we listened in vivo to the different expectations, needs, preoccupations of, or maybe obstacles and barriers that the different stakeholders had, maybe that we were not even aware of. So it's a process that really enriches our process because we receive different perspectives from different angles. And for us, this created a much better cohesion in our energy planning to group all these different needs, perspectives, visions with development plans in other sectors that we have at the level of our state. So this is how we organized our consultation processes, participative processes, open. And due to COVID-19, of course, we had certain difficulties to organize workshops and have massive processes, but what we really saw as an improvement is that we had a period of evaluation and updating every 5 years in order to update the different elements maybe that would be outdated in the elaboration of our planning, but always through a participative process. But we have the challenge now to elaborate different scenarios as they do in Chile. We believe that this is extremely interesting and we are going to investigate. Well, thank you very much, Juan Jose. This is one of the goals of this type of meetings, to see how we can learn from the different practices that we have in the region. And what Carlos showed us was really interesting, and he gave us a vision on how we can have this holistic planning. And I loved the fact that in El Salvador, you could create this much more profound dialogue with different sectors. That is absolutely fundamental, ensuring the participation of all. So with the new energy plan 2050 that you have for energy, you are in the good direction to improve also with the internal capacities. Is extremely important to create a group that is much more multidisciplinary, where we have different experts. This is fundamental. Thank you, Carlos and Juan Jose. And now we have very little time now. I would have loved to talk more with you. We have a lot to learn, but I congratulate both of you. I think you are doing an excellent work, both countries. You are in the good direction. You're going to have a wonderful successes. And now I give the floor to Antonio to continue.
Thank you, Ruben and Juan Jose. This shows the need to hold in-person events, to talk during the coffee break, to have a beer after the event, etc. But unfortunately, so far, we have to use the virtual format because of the pandemic. Well, a question, Julio, that we have received. This is for Chile, but it applies to both. It is from Gonzalo Ramos. He asks whether there is an expansion plan. So an expansion plan for the generation and transmission systems, no, for the system of expansion for this transmission system, so that it will not turn into a bottleneck in the future. That is the question. Thank you. Thank you, Antonio. Yes, in Chile, it is key to do that. The National Energy Commission, which is our governing body, it is the one that provides and establishes the technical standard, that they defines and establish the expansion of the system that has to be done. It is a regulated process, of course, and also it is a compulsory process. So after it is defined, what are the lines, the substations that are needed from the new circuit breaker up to the major lines that are to be developed. With once that is defined, it will become compulsory and then the independent operator, the national coordinator, will be in charge of calling for bids for all these new facilities. And then the companies interested will be part of the process in a transparent manner. The idea is that they build the facilities for the new system, and perhaps they will operate it as well. And actually, a couple of months ago, the National Electrical Coordinator from Chile published the bid requirements. Perhaps this is one of the most important bids in Chile, a bid for the construction and operation of a transmission line that will connect the northern region in the country with the central part of the region through a high voltage, an HVDC line, actually. This calls for a huge investment, $2 billion. And there was a call for an offer. And you see, we are anticipating the need for that line in the future. So the process I showed you helps to do this kind of work. We are forecasting the needs for the future and acting consequently. Thank you. Well, in El Salvador, the expansion of transmission is provided under the General Law for Electricity, and the transmission company of the country is in charge of this. It's a single company. It's a half private and half public, more or less, company. And they have this process for planning of expansion of the transmission lines. Yet, we have to do some match and coordination with them between indicative expansion of the generation park, which is done by the Energy Council, and the expansion plans. There's got to be an alignment. So there would be an investment plan that would be clear and in connection with the needs for growth. Then we have the transmission companies, but the investments in generation can be done by private bodies or entities. So in our country, what I mean is that there is an expansion plan for transmission as well, with the participation of this body of companies and entities. And I saw a question on the chart about our policy, our national electrical policy. It has been approved already. We're going to launch it officially at the end of this year, and the citizens will have access to that information soon. Thank you, Juan Jose. Thank you, Carlos. I'm going to share the next slide. Yes, I think this is the end because we are short of time. We had almost 60 participants, great. This shows that you've been very patient and that you are very interested in energy planning. Well, thank you very much to Carlos and Juan Jose. Thank you. On behalf of Carlos Carvajal, who had to go, we invite you for the next session that will be held on March the 31st with Argentina and the Dominican Republic. We will have Engineer Rocio Rodriguez, who is the coordinator for climate change and energy of the Energy Secretariat of Argentina, and we will have Alfonso Rodriguez from the Dominican Republic. He's the Vice Minister of Savings and Energy of the Ministry of Energy and Mines and the Executive Director of the National Energy Commission. Thank you again. We would also like to thank the coordinators of this event, Rubén Contreras Lisperguer, Asami Miqueta, Anthony Levy, René Salgado, Diego Messina, Pablo Carvajal, Nadim Gussus, Laura Gutierrez, and Antonio Levy from GET.transform. I invite you, all the coordinators and panel members and participants, to turn on your video so we can have a photograph taken of this session. Thank you very much. And then you can go, you're free to go. Thank you, Juan Jose. And I apologize once again for all the technical problems Hopefully in the next session that will be all solved. We learned a lot, and because there is a lot to learn from the practices that you are carrying out in your planning work. Thank you very much and have a nice weekend. Thank you. See you in 2 weeks.